I can tell from reading your comments that many of you feel like you're doing an absolutely horrible job of managing your mental health or your lives in general. And although I almost certainly do not know you, I can nearly guarantee that you are not doing quite as bad a job as you think you are. I think what you probably have going on, at least in part, is a measurement issue, and that you are measuring your own performance using the wrong metric and probably unintentionally using a metric that makes it look like you're doing a much worse job than you actually are. I know that might just sound like empty reassurances, but I'm going to explain why I think this. I have to give you kind of a lengthy metaphor first. The first minute or two of this might sound like absolute nonsense. Please bear with me. Promise this will make sense if you just stick with it for a minute. I suspect that your life might feel a little bit like you are the distribution manager for a large company. You have a limited amount of resources being produced in some factory somewhere that you have to send all across the country to these different regions of your company that each have several stores within them. And your production warehouse or production factory, I should say, is not making enough of the product, whatever it is, to keep every region that you are responsible for fully stocked. You simply do not have enough product. Every district manager of each of these regions in your company is telling you, we need more from you. What you are sending us is not enough. It's not getting the job done. We are struggling. Send us more stuff. And they don't necessarily realize, or maybe in some cases just don't care, that every district is telling you the same thing, and that this is simply a matter of not having enough of the product to distribute to everybody. And so basically, you are left with two choices. You can either give one district of the company all of the resources it needs, and they're going to do great. And then every other district is probably going to close because they aren't even going to have enough of the product to keep their doors open. Or you can try to distribute a relatively equal amount of the product to every region, which means everyone's frustrated at you and disappointed with you all of the time because they all think you're doing a horrible job. Does that sound a little bit like your life? If it does, you're probably already onto what I'm saying, but if it doesn't, let me explain the metaphor in a little bit more detail. The product in this case is your limited resources, right? So this is your time, your energy, and your attention. You only have so much of each of these things every day. And you have some control over how much time, energy, and attention you have through trying to manage things like your sleep hygiene, your nutrition, your physical activity, your relationship with substances. But even if you're doing an amazing job in all of those areas, there is a ceiling, right? There is a hard cap on how many resources you're going to have available on any given day. And these regions in the company, these are your big picture responsibilities in life. They will look a little bit different from one person to the next, but they're your big categories. So they might include your job or your education, or maybe both, your relationships, your health, your home, whatever kind of big picture categories you are responsible for as an individual. And then within each of these regions are these stores, and those are the more specific things, right? So if relationships are one region, then every specific relationship you have is one specific store in that region. You might have a spouse store, you might have a child store, you might have several child stores, you might have a few friend stores, family stores, etc. So these are all the things in your life that you're trying to send time, energy, and attention to. And many of them, maybe all of them, are either directly or indirectly telling you, we are not getting enough from you. You need to send more to us. And that's what puts you in this conundrum. That's part of why life can just kind of feel like this vice grip that's constantly just squeezing you a little bit tighter because there's only so many resources to go around. And even those of us who are not doing a lot of optional or like quote extra things in life, most adults have just an insane amount of responsibility. Our life, human society, adult life gets more and more complicated as we go. And if you look at like generation to generation, for the most part, This might make some people mad, but this is the way it looks like to me. We are putting more and more responsibilities on people. I mean, even just think about the amount of like two working parent families now compared to 70 years ago, right? It's this whole extra responsibility we've added to people. We haven't taken anything away, like nothing's gotten easier or simpler. And so it's just this constant escalation of responsibility. Your company is constantly opening more stores and taking on these new districts, and they're not necessarily increasing production. And so you are stretched more and more thin the more time goes by. And everybody is getting more and more upset with you because they're not getting what they need from you. Now, sometimes that everybody is literally other people, like with job or responsibilities. It might be people literally saying, like, we need more time from you. You're not doing a good enough job. When it comes to things like your health or your home, the person telling you you're not doing a good enough job is probably you, right? But again, keep in mind, these districts don't talk to one another. So your job district doesn't talk to your relationships district. Your actual boss at your actual job doesn't really care like how attentive you're trying to be as a father or a mother or a spouse. They just want you to work harder. They don't know or don't care or both. I guess it can't be both or whatever. Like what else you're trying to do in life. That's not of interest to them. They just want the maximum output that they can get from you at your career. And that's pretty much how all of these districts function for the most part. So if you, as the supply chain manager, are judging your performance in life by how well the stores or the districts are doing. In other words, if you like just look at how well you're doing at your job, and maybe you're not doing as well at your job as you'd like to be, or you're looking at your relationships and you're saying, my relationships are not as healthy as I'd like them to be. I'm not as healthy as I would like to be. My home doesn't look the way I want it to. If you look at all the outputs of these systems and you feel like you're falling short in every single one of them, it is a very easy thing to conclude I'm doing a terrible job. Like no district in my life is up to par. They are all mediocre at best, right? So that makes it look like you're doing a bad job. Because if you were doing your job, wouldn't they be thriving? Wouldn't they all just be maybe not perfect, but at least like really good? What you're missing here is that you're judging yourself by the wrong metric. Because there are so many other variables that factor in to how you're doing at work, how your relationships are going, other than just how hard are you trying. Because it goes back to this idea that the product is limited. You don't have as much to distribute as you would need to distribute for all those things to be going great. And this, I truly believe, this sucks, okay? But this is, I think, every adult, this is the choice we get to make. We can do exceptional in one area of life. We can keep one of these districts like incredibly, like basically almost perfect, but every other one is going to be just absolute bottom of the barrel. Or we can keep them all functioning decently, but none of them are going to be as good as we want them to be. I do not believe that it is possible to keep them all excellent. I think life does not give us enough resources for that to be a possibility. And so I think those are your two choices. You can either pick one and you can say, this is the one that matters most to me. I'm going to keep this one running great, and everything else is going to probably fall apart a little bit. Or I'm going to try to distribute things fairly evenly, and everything's going to be well short of what I would like it to be. I think those are our only choices. And I say this as somebody who has worked incredibly hard to minimize any frivolous expenditure of resources. And so what I mean by that is like I do not spend very much time on like things that are just for fun. I my districts, the things that I'm responsible for in my life, which pretty much are the four things I just said, that's all I do. basically. Like, I really don't put resources into other things. I'm not spending, a- and I'm not saying this judgmentally, okay? And I'm just describing my own life. I am not spending hours and hours and hours of time like at the driving range or at the game or whatever. I'm not saying people can't or shouldn't do those things. What I'm saying is even if you don't do those things, I still don't think you're going to feel like you're doing amazing at everything, even if all you do is like quote work or responsibilities or tasks. Because that's how I'm living. And although I do personally prefer to live that way, and I feel better than when I have a lot of what I consider to be frivolous expenditure of resources, I still feel like I am falling well short of the mark for where I would like to be in every single area of my life. And I'm not saying this as like a woe is me, please convince me I'm wrong. Like, this is not that. You guys do not have to go in the comments and be like, no, it's not true. You're great. This is not a pity party. This is just me validating you that I think that doing great at everything that matters is actually not possible. I do not think it is a real thing we can achieve. I think we are all out here just doing our best. And to bring this idea full circle, why I think that means you might actually be doing a really good job is if a supply chain manager does not have enough resources to keep all of their districts running really well, and they find a way to distribute this really thin margin of resources to their districts so that none of them close. They're all not as good as they could be. They're all like grumpy and dissatisfied, but nothing is closing. Nothing is actually falling apart. Everything is surviving, if only by a thread sometimes. If you judge the performance of that supply chain manager not by the performance of the stores, but by their distribution of insufficient resources, would you or would you not say that that person is actually doing an exceptional job of managing a very suboptimal set of circumstances? I would say that they are. And I would say that the gap between potential and performance for each of these districts, in other words, I'm sorry if this is too metaphorical. I have post-COVID brain today, and it's entirely possible that this makes no sense, but I don't think that's the case. I think I'm onto something here. You can't just judge yourself by, am I doing as well as I could be, like in a perfect world? At my career? Does my house look the way I want it to? Am I as healthy as I want to be? Are my relationships going as well as I'd want them to be? You can't take any one thing and look at it in isolation and see that you're falling short of the mark you set for yourself, or maybe the mark other people set for you in some cases, and conclude that means I'm doing a terrible job because this gap exists between where I want my performance to be and where my performance actually is. And I'm not saying that that gap doesn't exist. You may be right about that. The gap exists for me. I'm not the person who I want to be in any part of my life. There's a lot of room for improvement in every single thing I do. But it's not because I'm not trying. It's not because I'm doing a terrible job. It's because to do everything the way I think it could be done in my own life would require me to have at least a 30 to 40-hour day, like at least maybe more, unlimited energy, which although I like to think that I have, and I do have a lot of energy, it's not. I hit that wall too sometimes. There are plenty of days when I have time remaining in the day, like the day's not over, but I have no energy left. There's like, yeah, there's still 3 or 4 hours before I'm gonna go to bed, but nothing's gonna happen in that time frame. I am spent. I am done. Sometimes I have time and physically I have energy, but sometimes I have no attention left. Sometimes my brain is just so stretched thin. It's so depleted from, I don't know, I don't even know what it's from sometimes. Task switching, compassion fatigue, I don't know. But I hit whatever brick wall, each of these three resources, I hit a wall with one of them at some point during the day, and that's it. That's the end. And I'm never done. There's always more I want to do. There's always more I feel like I should be doing. And for a long, long time, that made me feel like a failure because I never achieved my benchmarks. But recently, I've been thinking about it from this logistics perspective. And if I looked at myself as the logistics manager of my own life, and I looked at it in that context and said, knowing that I don't have enough resources to meet the mark, isn't it actually kind of exceptional that I'm even like maintaining a basic level of functioning and that nothing has completely fallen apart? That's actually really good. If I judge my performance by the distribution of resources and not by whether the gap exists between where I want to be and where I'm at in any particular domain of my life. And I think that if you look at your own life through that lens and look at simply, am I distributing my resources in a way that prevents catastrophic failure? Because that's the most important thing, right? Don't completely collapse, fall apart, and or die. I mean, if you want to talk baseline, if you're avoiding those things, you're doing pretty good. Like you are. Those are not guarantees. Those are not givens. I've had periods in my life when I was completely non-functional. So that always gives me like when you hit that real rock bottom, like you cannot get out of bed, you cannot talk to people, your body doesn't work, your brain cannot complete a thought. When you've been there, even maintaining a basic level of functioning, even if it's well below what most people are doing or expect of you, don't ever take that for granted because that's not the bottom. It isn't. And if you're at like this really minimal, like I'm doing the bare minimum in all these areas and nothing more. That's not the bottom. That is an achievement. You have to work to get there. And that's not a given for any human being. So if that's where you are today, you might actually be doing pretty good. That might be the best that you are capable of under the current circumstances. Now, long term, whole other topic. Hopefully, we can get that production factory to increase production so that this is not your state forever. That's another topic for another video. For today, I hope this, hopefully not overcomplicated metaphor, helps you see you are doing better than you realize. You are not failing. And if you are preventing your company from completely collapsing, that's something you should be able to feel good about. I hope that helps. I'll see you next time. Take care.